Okay, I think I will start, if that's okay for everyone. I hope, I think there's still people joining us, but we can start with introductions. Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Ines Kempfer. I am the CEO of the Center for Child Rights and Business. We are an organization that works directly with companies to ensure that they're creating a positive impact on children in their supply chains. And as such, I'm obviously particularly interested and for today's webinar, which is very close to our work, but also very close to my heart, on the role of local businesses in ending child labor. I want to thank the organizer for putting this webinar together on such an important topic. The webinar is organized by Alliance 8.7 together with the WNCB, that stands for Work No Child's Business, an alliance between UNICEF Save the Children and Stop the Child Labor coalition in India, Vietnam, Jordan, Ivory Coast, Mali, Uganda, and the Netherlands, where programs are currently implemented to work towards the elimination of child labor. We are making progress if we are looking at child labor. In the last decade, the child labor has decreased by around 38%. However, unfortunately, there's still around an estimated 152 million children that are in a child labor situation, and that was the number before the pandemic. We all know that COVID-19 and all the impacts that came with it have really severely aggravated the situation for many children, in particular loss of income, no access to school, and because of this, many organizations such as Save the Children, UNICEF, have assumed and also have already first data coming in that shows that there's potentially going to be an increase in child labor. UNICEF and Save the Children have a study where they say it's around 10 million, they estimate around 10 million children that were out of school during the pandemic are not going to go back to school and are basically going to be trapped in a child labor situation. And actually we just have, and I think I shared part of that on the Slack chat as well, we just gotten some results just 2 weeks ago from a preliminary study that we are doing in DRC together with Save the Children that has shown that in fact 60% of the children that we have found on cobalt mines told us that they stopped school and started working, or at least started working full-time during the last 12 months. And so that was for us kind of real heartbreaking evidence on the impact of COVID that is really pushing children into these situations. And as such, it's obviously really important we work on this, that we focus on it, that we make it a priority. Given that the Alliance 8.7 deadline for the elimination of child labor is 2025, we definitely would need to really accelerate our efforts to achieve that. The good news is we have a lot of opportunity to do so. This is the year towards the elimination of child labor, the international year for the elimination of child labor, in short, IYECL, an abbreviation that I have a really hard time with to say it correctly. But it's a really exciting initiative. There's already over 300 regional bodies, organizations, companies that have put in pledges on how they are going to make extra efforts during this year to work towards the elimination of child labor. The deadline for putting forward pledges has passed, but if you want to get inspired or see what others are doing, you can visit the website endchildlabor2021.org. that will also, I think, feature in the chat, where you can see that. And this is just one of the initiatives going on. Tonight, we're going to have representatives talking from Vietnam and Mexico. Both of those countries are pathfinder countries within the Alliance 8.7 movement that kind of accelerate their efforts as countries to work toward child labor. And we hear some examples of how that looks like on the ground today, actually. And in just a few weeks, on the 12th of June, is the International Day of Child Labour, which is another kind of a good opportunity to push forward this agenda and really obviously take action. It's important to raise our voice, but also to find practical ways to tackle this. I'm obviously particularly excited about today's webinar because it's going to look at specifically what is the role of businesses and also what is the role of local businesses towards the elimination of child labor. And we're going to hear from the panelists, the exciting panelists that we have with us today, a little bit about how that it looks in some kind of best practices or examples that have shown some positive results, and how businesses can contribute towards the elimination of child labor. I think it's important here to remember that business is often not the main cause for child labor. There's a lot of things around business, general socioeconomic situations, poverty, access to education, etc., that drive child labor. But business can obviously, if not done responsibly, contribute and multiply the risks for child labor. But on the plus side, business can also then be the ones who mitigate that risk for child labor and who really can often, with quite practical, fast, and very effective measures, ensure that they can contribute by creating decent working conditions for parents so that the parents can send their children to school, and afford a decent living standard by opening or providing opportunities for decent youth, etc. Business can really take practical actions towards the elimination of child labor, and I'm really looking forward to the different examples that we are going to hear today around that topic. You will now see, I think, on your screens a poll that is going to go run on the side. We would be really appreciative if you could answer those couple of questions that are in the poll. We will then later take a look, and that's a good opportunity for you all. You will also see in the chat a couple of technical information if you have questions. If you have questions to the panelists or also anything around the webinar, please use the chat function to do that. We have people looking at the chat function, and we'll obviously try to make this as interactive and beneficial for everybody who's joining. So don't hesitate to use the chat function to bring in your comments, questions, etc. Good, and looking forward that we hear, so take a few seconds to quickly answer the free poll questions. And while you do that, I'll start introducing our first panelists. We have a really exciting group of panelists with us. Our first panelist is Fanta Zadibou-Kone. Fanta, now I just realized that I put sorry, I prepared your bio in French, Fanta, so now we just changed plans, so I have to translate back from French to English. I hope that's going to be okay. But Fanta has been working over 10 years around humanitarian work and has contributed to programs in development and education. She has also done a lot of field research and contributed to several studies in the kind of development around development topics, and she is since 2019 she joined the WNCB, so the Work No Child Business Program in Mali, and is supporting the implementation there. So today she will kind of focus on her experience with WNCB in bringing kind of a collaborative framework with authorities, gold mining companies and communities together, and just share with us what approaches they used, the bottom-up, top-down strategy they applied, and what WNCB expects from companies and local authorities. So with this, Fanta, quand même quelques mots en français, je suis vraiment contente.
I'm very happy to have you here with us. Please go ahead. Thank you very much, Inez. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's a true pleasure to be here today to share Mali's experience with you. I think we were supposed to have a video, and I will share with you what we've had to do with child labour and the role of businesses. So, can you see the video? The Voices of the Children of Mali. Work, no child's business. I'm called Rokia Sidwi. I'm 15 years old. The Work No Child's Business project invited us to the Mayor's Office in Saluba for training in gardening, and that's what I do. I'm aware of the advantages of market gardening, and I do it throughout the year. I work a great deal, in fact. I have vegetables in my garden on the water's edge. I really like this work. There are lots of disadvantages to gold mining. I was working in the gold mines. I didn't have a school education when I was there. The children are left to themselves. There were no fathers and mothers. So it's this gardening work which has taught me really and has shown me the dangers of the gold mining. We came thanks to the WNCB project, who spoke to us about the gardening. They trained us. I don't have to borrow money anymore. They gave us money for the materials. We're asking for the support of the project so that we can continue to move forward. Market gardening has a great deal of advantages, and it benefits all of us, brothers and sisters. It's beneficial for all of the community. I would like to thank WNCB for their support, and I would like to ask them to continue to help me to study the Bamanakan language. I didn't get a school education, and that fact has meant that today I'm really struggling. If I had the opportunity, I would say so to my parents.
Merci beaucoup, Ines.
Thank you very much. Thank you for putting on the video. There should be a presentation as well on experience sharing, and we'll explain the approach that we adopted. Within the program, the approach that we took was mainly on a series of identifications. I hope you can see it. Next slide, please. So, approaches. So, the first was more general, and it enabled us to build robust, lasting relationships with NGOs, with businesses, with investors, authorities, and others. The second was to identify mining businesses in the area, and we identified three main ones: Hummingbird Resources, Marco Mining, and Ali Lithium Limited. And on top of these three, we also identified 30 panning sites. Then we looked at the different actors in the value chain, and we worked on three levels. On a national level, with the National Federation of Gold Panners. Then we had the representation of these two organisations, and then the Organisation of Women Panners. Then we've got gold transporters, jewellers, anybody who takes part in creating things from gold. Then we have management committees of gold mining companies and so on and so forth. The last point was cooperation between partners. And here we had meetings between mining companies with work inspectors, the directors of geology for mines, political leaders, administrative leaders, and traditional leaders. Next slide, please. The strategy that we adopted worked both ways. First of all, top-down, and then bottom-up. So top-down allowed us to synergize our actions in order to be able to remove children from panning sites and make sure that they weren't replaced with more children. It also allowed us to amplify this in the community and look at the different roles. Then, bottom-up wasn't only about drawing attention of the authorities to the problem, but rather encouraging them to play a more active role in being involved in justice and complementary actions from the authorities in order to strengthen the work carried out on a local level and avoiding that we work in duality. We identified a series of roles, not only for businesses but also for authorities. I would just like to mention a few from the list. For example, we asked for there to be a periodic dialogue framework with all stakeholders in order to better incorporate their views in decision making. Next slide, please. Equally, the gradual implementation of an environmental and social system. These are the elements that I mentioned that are really lacking. With regards to local and administrative authorities, next slide, please. Local and administrative authorities are obliged to put in place protection when third parties, including businesses, damage human rights in the area. And this exists in terms of the adoption of appropriate measures which will put an end to these actions. So prevention mechanism, and where issues happen, they need a management mechanism. So authorities should also clearly announce what they expect of these businesses. We had cases where they weren't really sure what they should be doing. Then we need social and environmental responsibility actions. We need to broaden social dialogue, disseminate social and environmental responsibility, including among small and medium-sized enterprises. We need to develop socially responsible investment and give administrative advantages to businesses. We had a good example with Sonica. Next slide, please. With one of the programs in this area on corporate social responsibility, we looked at sustainability with them, and it's because of that the current program has put in place the basis of cooperation with SMK, which is another business, and they're going to have a working channel with them which will set out complementary activities and support that we will provide through an agreement. Of course, we want the community to be in this same approach with the business. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. With regards to informal mines or panning, it's very important to labour this sector because it's the least well organised and it's the most dangerous. We realised that corporate social responsibility must also be included in sustainable development and respect for the environment, which will lead to participation of informal businesses. This will make it easier to remove children from panning sites. Next slide, please. As regards community implications, we realised that involving the community, whether it's in the management or conflict in the management of panning sites, is really key. The importance of these links on a community level are real opportunities that we need to exploit in order to avoid child labour, in order to fight against child labour, and also in order to ensure better environmental management. We, of course, identified some difficulties. We will only mention two here. First of all, the lack of statistics on the number of producers, particularly in the informal sector, in terms of where the gold is coming from and how much it's produced. Then the lack of understanding of the rights of children, because generally it's parents who take their children onto the panning sites. Next slide, please. In terms of solutions, we focused on training, on best practices for gold mining, the rights of the child, the environment, which will also include children. And we mustn't forget also that we need to organise gold panning sites in order to know who's working there. We need to know the quantities of gold that are produced in this way and where it goes to. Next slide, please. So, in terms of a programme, what do we expect from the different entities? Well, authorities first. We expect that they should make sure that businesses contribute to the development of the local area, that they respect workers' rights, that they implement exchange frameworks with businesses. And they also need to ensure that there are no children in panning sites and that children who have been removed from these sites are not replaced with new children or go to work elsewhere. With regards to the businesses, they need to ensure that their actions are part of the development framework plan for each municipality. They also need to contribute to the elimination of child labour. We also expect them to work with others And in a way, they need to put in place actions in order to support the community in seeking solutions. They also need to put in place a support mechanism for child education, whether in informal or formal areas. For the last slide, this is our philosophy. The school is the only workplace for a child. And this is true whether we're talking about formal or informal businesses. The school is the only workplace possible for a child. So I'd like to thank you very much, Inez, and give you back the floor.
Thank you so much, Fanta, for this insights in the work that you're doing in Mali. It's incredibly fascinating, and we can learn so much, I think, from it, as so many efforts are ongoing. And I think it's particularly, as you said, interesting how you're trying to include the informal local businesses. And I kind of, and I think we've heard quite a bit, or I've heard quite a bit when we do similar projects like that with bigger international companies and we link them up. But can you maybe talk a little bit about what kind of was the value for you to really working with the communities and linking them and integrating them or bringing them together in this project with businesses of all sizes, obviously in particular also smaller businesses and informal business?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. Through the work that we've carried out, in terms of added value, first of all, I would say that we are making the community responsible. They're taking the project on board and they're active in seeking solutions and applying the solution. They're appropriating the project. Then there's the coordination of the various efforts that take place in the field, and that's very important. In terms of the results, we want lasting results. We want to change not only of behaviour but also of mentality, so that little by little we can move into areas that can be declared child labour-free zones. That's the added value. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I do hope we're going to get some more time for a few more questions towards the end. We're still very much in our time planning. So with this, I think I'm going to move over to our panelist from Mexico, David Zamora. He is the Secretary of Economics of the Municipal Government of Tuxtla Gutierrez, Chiapas in Mexico. David is actually a qualified architect, but and has a lot of experience himself in working in the private sector, but has since held several public-facing positions. And I think it's since 2018 that David has become the Municipal Secretary of Economy. I think what is quite special about Tuxtla Gutierrez is that they're working very intensively, the government's working very intensively with the local businesses to prevent child labor in the production and marketing of local products. And not only have they started or are they implementing awareness-raising programs amongst businesses, but I think very interestingly, they've recently started to include child labor-related conditions as criteria in operating licenses, which I think is a very interesting approach. So I'm looking forward to hear more from you, David, how you are kind of implementing this work and how you're trying to ensure that the guidelines from the federal government around child labor are really implemented on the ground in your municipality. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and over to you.
Muchas gracias. Les voy a compartir ahorita, les voy a platicar un poquito a todos qué es lo que estamos haciendo. Primero que nada, los saludo con afecto y quiero comentarles que Tuxtla Gutiérrez, Chiapas, se encuentra ubicado al sur de México, colindamos con la República de Guatemala. Somos un estado rico en cultura, cuna de la civilización zoque y maya. Tenemos biodiversidad.
We're located in Chiapas, Mexico, just alongside the Guatemalan border. We have all sorts of products that we grow. However, there's significant poverty. 5.5 million people from our region live there, and 4.2 million people have socioeconomic shortcomings, so 70% of the population. As a result, many of the people from the interior lands migrate to the capital seeking jobs and better livelihoods. They primarily come from regions with indigenous peoples. As we're seeking opportunities, they move with their entire families, and that's when they put their kids to work in the streets, in the parks, and other public spaces. Or they're involved in domestic work. As a result of this, we put in place a new model, a model where we can identify risks of child labor. This is a tool that was put in place by the ILO Mexico branch and the Economic Commission for America and the Caribbean. CEPAL. Now, they're responsible for the socioeconomic development of the region. In 2018, we published the results of Phase 1 of the program that determined that Chiapas was at high risk for child labor. Concretely, my town is one where there is a low risk. To avoid further risks in 2019, we worked with the ILO Mexico branch in order to implement Phase 2 of this tool. Now, what did this entail? First of all, we worked across the region to identify areas that might have a highest potential risk. During this phase, in June 2019, we signed a memorandum of understanding between the ILO Mexico and our city council. We were the first to do so in Mexico, Latin America, and the Caribbean. In 2018, we also launched an economic project called the Tuxtleco Point Social Businesses. Now, the aim was to promote the development of local businesses which would turn products into semi-processed products. The aim of the product is to create value chains so that we can have better prices for crops through fair trade policies. This helps families to have jobs, formal jobs and decent jobs. We've also had support from local universities in this work. Coming back to the work that Mirti, the tool, is doing, in 2020 we wrapped up Phase 2. We identified 4 areas in the municipality with a higher risk of child labor. We also identified variables which might boost or diminish the risk of child labor. As we wrapped up Phase 2, we decided to move forward and further our work in the region. So we went to the San Jose neighborhood, which, according to our Mirti study, was in a high-risk area. As a result, we decided to use the Census Method. The aim was to have a list of child laborers. So we identified the names and addresses of all of these children and teenagers involved in child labor. Unfortunately, in 2020, the pandemic hit. As a result, we had to break off our work. However, the census was helpful. It allowed us to provide food support to the population, for example. But the pandemic didn't stop us. Rather, we consolidated what we had learned. Now, how did we do that? We worked with our public policy on child and adolescent labor and teen labor in the region. We reached out to those involved in the Punto Tuxtleco project to ensure that the project would continue in the near future. Furthermore, they engaged to have no child labor. That brings us to 2021, where we consolidated our strategies. We ensured that this project would continue, and the aforementioned regulation was approved in the City Council. We're also working with the National Institute for the Social Economy, INAIS, which is part of the Secretariat of Welfare of the Government of Mexico. The aim was to boost the social economy. We also aim to share our strategies with participating businesses. And the model we've adopted is one of cooperatives. We've also had support from a local university. Furthermore, the Punto Tus Legos strategy was part of an innovation strategy, one launched by the Inter-American Development Bank. And it was one of the finalists, the 15 finalists of over 180 participants. This has allowed us to raise visibility of our strategies on the international stage. Of course, our strategies are tied to economic growth and the eradication of child labor. Now, this is all tied to our Tuxtla Gutierrez Free of Child Labor project. This will be a kind of badge for local companies implementing policies which help to boost the eradication of child labor. The aim is to guarantee and strengthen our culture of corporate social responsibility. This will help to boost development of good practices to ensure that children and adolescents in our region are well protected. Now, our aim is to bring in more civil society organizations and companies to ensure the continuity of this project. I'd like to thank the Alliance 8.7 for inviting me to speak at this very important event. I'd also like to thank the International Labor Organization, Mexico branch, and the Latin American Network to Target Child Labor. Thank you very much for your very helpful support, which is helping us to fight for a society free of child labor. Finally, I'd like to invite you to take a look at the Slack channel so you can read more about the information that I've just shared. Finally, I'd like to invite you to the most beautiful state in Mexico, to Chiapas. Please feel free to join us so you can see the work that we're doing. Thank you very much.
Adelante, Inés.
Thank you so much for this very engaged presentation of what you're doing. I'm really very intrigued by it. We do a lot of child labor remediation, and it's often so hard. So I was just thinking, well, I wish we had more governments around when we do that, like your government does, who seems so engaged, not only in preventing child labor, not only in making sure business understand that this is not acceptable, but it seems to me very practically also supporting the community, supporting the children. And it's interesting what you said, that it helped you also to take the right actions during the pandemic, although you couldn't continue as you planned, which is exactly what we experience in so many situations, as well as the children in child labor situations and their families are often really the most vulnerable ones, and were the ones needing extra support during the worst times of the or still are during these times of the pandemic. So thank you so much for that, and I'm really interested in how you're bringing the government perspective together with the small business perspective and aligning it. You're creating a business incentive, which I find very, very important. So it is obviously for the elimination of child labor, but it also makes a lot of business sense for the businesses in your region to get engaged. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think is for the businesses in your region the most important tool or kind of capacity, skill, knowledge that you think that's what they absolutely need in order to get started, to really to be able to implement or be on that path where they contribute significantly towards the elimination of child labor?
Gracias, Inés.
Thank you, Inés, for that question. The most significant challenge, in our view, is raising awareness of child labor. Unfortunately, when you see kids on the street day in and day out, it seems like it's something that's just normal. And when people start seeing it as completely normal, when people see kids working and they think it's normal, they just don't focus on it. That's why another key topic for us is raising awareness, putting this problem on the map. If you see a child at a park, on the streets, and you give them money in exchange for them doing something, well, you are promoting child labor. But people don't see it that way. People think they're helping out these kids, but actually they're harming them. Because the money doesn't go to that child, the money goes to the child's family. So that's our big challenge. There's another key strategy that we've adopted, and this is about raising awareness. We have to tell people what companies aren't employing kids. That's why we have the Tuxtla Free of Child Labor badge. The aim, of course, is to raise awareness about those companies committed to our efforts. We want to tell people to go out and look for companies with this badge that's demonstrating that they're not hiring child labor. And that helps to boost a kind of culture of not employing children and adolescents. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this. And I think it's a fascinating example, and we will definitely learn from it. I know there's a lot of governments out there who are actually looking into how they can create that role and how can they create this incentives with businesses, because, and particularly also with local business, because sometimes we have incentive for international export-oriented business because they operate in a situation where kind of the high compliance standard or the social responsibility, as Fanta also mentioned, is important, but we need to bring obviously that thinking to also local businesses that produce for the domestic market, that are not just producing for export, and that's where these kind of activities such as you just described are so important. So thank you so much, and also I hope we have a few more questions and follow-up questions in the later part. I think that lets us over to Lani, who joins us tonight. It's tonight for us in the Asia zone. I know it's very early morning in Mexico, but leads us to Lani, who joins us from Vietnam. Lani is the compliance officer of Smart Elegant International Vietnam, a manufacturer in Vietnam. She will just tell us a little bit more. She's been in this role, or she's been with Smart Elegant for over 8 years, and is in her current role, she is now practically responsible to oversee the compliance of the 3 different company facilities that Smart Elegant International owns. And obviously that makes her very much on the front line of the work that we talking about today, as she's one of the people out there implementing it and making the change. Smart Elegant is part of the ILO's Better Work program, and is also participating decided to participate in the Work No Child Business program in Vietnam, and they are just in the process of completing the first module in that program, which is mainly around child labor prevention and remediation in their business, both internal management, but also in their management of the supply chain. They've already started some more preventative actions, and we just talked about the importance of, for example, or I think Fanta talked about the importance for parents to understand to understand how they need to protect their children, and I think Smart Elegant just started with the first rounds of parent training and awareness raising that as well. So I'm really looking forward to that very from the field, from the ground sharing that we have tonight. Together with Lani, we have Lam with us, who will help Lani to do part of the presentation that Lani has prepared. Lam will help it to present it in English, as we don't have a Vietnamese translation today. So Lam has decided to take over this role. So welcome, Lani and Lam, and over to you.
Ines, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. I'm speaking for Lani from Smart Elegant Vietnam. Alison, can you show the slide? Yeah, thank you. This is the experience sharing for everyone to see how work No Child business program is helping a business like Smart Elegant International Vietnam to tackle child labor risk in at the country levels. So next please. Next please. Yeah. So the Smart Elegant International Vietnam is a garment factory located in Ho Chi Minh City, and we produce underwear, t-shirt, top, pants, and jackets. We have 3 locations in Ho Chi Minh City with more than 1,000 workers, and at 3 locations we have 7,000 square meters producing garments, embroidery and printings. We do printings from some of our products. So one of our factories doing printing, and in our system we have established HR related policy and procedures covering compliant topics, including no child labor, no discrimination, no forced labor, working hours, arrangement of working hours, and health and safety. All of these topics are related to, in some way, related to the child labor topics. And throughout the system, we have grievance mechanisms and regular training for workers and managers on all compliance topics. And as Ines mentioned, we are have done a few cycles of better work programs. So all of these compliance focus. Next, please, Alison. And we understand that businesses need to work with government, with the social civil society organization like international NGOs and NGOs to work on a system to tackle child labor risks. And the focus is on children, their family, and with support from communities. So businesses like Smart Elegant International Vietnam, we need to have a so-called inclusive child labor prevention and remediation strategy for businesses, which for us should cover 3 different pillars. So the first pillars covering internals and supply chain management system is more policy and procedures focus, and it's more compliance focus. And then the other 2 pillars supporting parents with parenting skill trainings and childcare support, childcare options that the employers can provide to workers, and also opportunity and support for young workers. The young workers trainings and opportunities given is one of the focus of one of the goals of the alliance. So you can see that the last 2 pillars, supporting for parents and opportunity for young workers, are more beyond compliance. And in order to doing this, the Work No Child Business Program have supported us on 4 different topics. Next, please. So as Ines mentioned, we have done the first modules, and we are closing the first module this month. In this module, child labor prevention and remediation programs, we have run a few workshops for at factory levels, supplier levels, so and also consultation webinar and on-site consultation visits. So the Center for Child Rights and Business came to our factories and provide trainings and support on revision of different policies and procedures, and also practically guided around to improve some policies that is applied in our system. As I mentioned before, our system was very compliance focused, and now we are doing more to improve the system, not only to focus on compliance issues, but also to start to prepare for some beyond compliance. So we have improved the age verification procedure for handling child labor cases, and also case of juvenile workers working in hazardous areas or working overtime that is not allowed by the law or by the local law. And we also developed a new policy on management of young workers. And currently we are finalizing some documents, policies on suppliers and contractor management system. Next, please. So the plan ahead for us, we have started the working parent training modules, the second modules in the Work No Child project program in April, and from now until December this year, we will provide trainings for parents, workers to strengthen their parenting skill, helping them to understand their children better, and helping them to communicate with their children better, especially the one who have children left behind at their hometown with their grandparents or their relative. And this working parent training program also help to raise awareness of the parents, workers, so that they understand to avoid to support their children to avoid the risk of school dropout early and engage into works too early, not only in the factory levels, but the parents can have better understand of child labor also in the agricultural level, so that their children will not engage in work too early. And in this year, in 2022, we are planning to join the youth development program, so that we can prepare to employ more young workers. I mean the juvenile workers who are from 15 to 17 years old, which are allowed to work by Vietnam law, but there's regulation, strict regulation around that, and the centers and the Work No Child Business program will help us to prepare for that. And the program is planned to provide soft skill and job skill training for young workers as well. And it's in this program prevention of juvenile workers working in hazardous areas or overtime is also a part of the training for us, capacity building for us, because these if young workers working in this area is also considered child labor. And the final modules that we are considering in the last year of the program is child-friendly space, which is to provide our workers with alternative childcare options, because without alternative childcare options, like during summer holidays or after hours, some of the worker children may go to work with their parents or may go to visit with their parents because they don't have anyone to take care. Yeah, so that is the plan for that is what we have done during the last 6 months and the plan ahead when we engage in the Work No Child Business program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lam, and thank you, Lani, for preparing this presentation. I actually saw there is also some questions coming in the chat. I think this last point around integrating young workers under the right conditions to be a really important topic. And the question was also, and that's a question to you, so how can a supplier or a company like Smart Elegant, who's fairly big and formalized, but how can you now bring, and I saw that on the slide that is, you're working on your policies with sub-suppliers and sub-producers, so how can you bring down that kind of effort of working towards the elimination of child labor in your own supply chain and with smaller businesses?
Yes, nowadays most of our international license have greater concerns and a stricter requirement on supplier chain management, which means child labor risk management at the first tier factory like us, Smart Elegant International Limited, and also at the lower tiers, including suppliers and subcontractors. During the WNCB program, the Center for Child Rights and Business has supported us to enhance our exciting system, especially a verification and recruitment procedures, and establish new policy on recruitment of young workers. So by now, we have not seen the need to recruit juvenile workers yet, and we will consider in the future. For the lower tier suppliers, we provided one is pricing for them on our supplier management system with some stress on minimum working age and child labor prevention, and also reviewing the agreement with them on it. We conduct internal audits to ensure implementation of the policy. Smart Elegant International Vietnam is a current yield to subcontractor for production processes including printing and embroidery, and 5 service providers for security guards, transportation service, garbage cleaning, and canteen catering. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lani. I think that's very interesting to hear how you're becoming an agency for child labor, bringing it down to smaller companies that you're working with, to embroidery workshops, etc. I think many people like us who've been working in supply chains for many years, that is really the dream come true if you really can cascade it down the supply chain and have everyone involved in this role, and seeing a company like yours getting so active in that area is very encouraging. So thank you so much for this. I think in these in these last is it an hour? Soon an hour. We've had incredibly interesting contributions from the three speakers, and maybe to just summarize a little bit on some of the key elements we heard from Fanta about the importance of businesses working together with NGOs and community-based organizations, and really making sure that children are not just withdrawn from work, but that they're actually supported and integrated in the formal education system. And that kind of all stakeholders mobilize together around this idea that the only place of work should be the school, and really creating those child labor-free zones. And then David has given us a very insightful summary on how his municipality and the government is basically creating business incentives and innovative initiatives to support to support the businesses to follow this agenda, to create awareness, and also with that adding value to their products and actually generate more income, and with that also kind of linked to the prevention of child labor. And he stressed the importance of awareness raising for businesses and also for people to understand how to tackle the child labor problem and not just get used to it just because it's common. And then lastly, we just heard from Lam and Lani about the importance to organize the workers and raise awareness in the factory and company level and really adapt kind of management system, HR policies, etc., and then take responsibility, not just for your own systems, but down the supply chain as well, and further kind of supporting and taking preventative measures through supporting parents, creating childcare support, but also offering decent work for youth under conditions that are positive for youth and give development opportunities and not exploitative. So this is just a very quick summary on some of the key points that we heard. I think we could now go to look at the results of the poll that we did at the very beginning of this session with the 3 questions. I think, Alison, if you can show those results, if that works. So the question is whether our attendees are working with one or more business to eradicate child labor or have ever done so, and we can see that I think we have a very experienced and knowledgeable group amongst the attendees in this webinar. 77% say they have actually done so. Then the question is who thinks that the SDG target 8.7 to eliminate child labor by 2025, so that's in 4 years, is achievable. The biggest group says no. There are nearly a bit less than a bit more than 1/4 who say maybe, and a few very optimistic people who say yes. That is obviously a very steep goal that I think would have been very steep in any case. It's probably becoming a bit steeper now through COVID, but I think it's important not to lose hope and at least work towards that as much as we can. The third question is about the difficulty to get exact data, but in your view and your area of work, by what proportion has the number of children in child labor increased compared to before COVID-19 crisis? So just on what we said, what obviously makes this much harder. And we have the so the biggest group says they do not know, which I think is very honest, and we have very little data still at the moment. But we have 35% who said it probably has increased by about 25%, and we have nearly 1/5, or just above 1/5, who says it has increased around 50%, and 4% even talk about 75%. So I do think we have a significant number of people on the call who, through their experience, which they seem to have a lot, see some increase in child labor after COVID-19. As we mentioned in the beginning, this definitely is a real just intensifying call for action, and maybe it's not the sprint that we thought it's going to be, but we need to run a bit longer, but we need to run nevertheless towards that goal. Thanks so much, Alison, for showing this poll, and thank everyone for participating. That is really, really interesting. Then I would like to make a little round amongst all our participants, because you have so many interesting things to say, and just wanted to ask you what kind of would be your number one top advice or top tip that you would want to give to us on how it's best to work with local businesses to end child labor? So if you have one recommendation, one suggestion to give, how would you like to do that? Let's go in the same order that we had before. So Fanta, if you want to start with that.
I would say involve community. Once you involve community and you have their agreement, qui sont d'accord. Sorry, j'ai déjà commencé en anglais.
Forgive me for starting in English. Once they agree and they go for it 100%, it guarantees success between 45 and 50% of the time. So you always need to involve communities, and then the rest follows.
Really, really good advice that I don't think all programs do so intensively follow. So we can definitely take that one to heart. Thank you so much. David, what is your number one recommendation?
Educar para sensibilizar a la población.
I think that you need to raise awareness amongst the people. When the population doesn't know the damaging effect of children and teenagers working, they allow it. Unaware of the damage that it all creates. So a society which is aware, as Fanta said, can help us. We can build better societies. Without awareness of society, whatever we do as organisations and governments, we won't get that response that we all want, which is avoiding and eradicating child labour.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that is a really again, it's also really including, the society and the different stakeholders to that knowledge. And as you said, I think it is also really coming out of this acceptance that it's normal. I have often felt that sometimes parents or society, you say, oh yeah, it's normal. It's a way of coping, right? They're getting used to it, and you don't want to feel bad every day and what you see. So you cope with it, and you just put it into the normal. This is just what we do. And I think by showing what you all do, by showing that there is other solutions, that there's other solutions for the children, that children can be reintegrated back into school, then we can work on this awareness and really increase this message about this is not how it's supposed to be, and that's not where the children are supposed to be. So thank you so much for them. Lani Lam team, I don't know who wants to answer that question, but what would be your top recommendation on how to work with other businesses on towards the elimination of child labor?
Spoke to parent workers and young workers.
So I think you were on mute for the first two words, but you were saying including the parent workers and the young workers?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't know, Lam, do you want to elaborate a little bit on this, or?
Yeah, I think Lanis want to say that you need to provide support to parents, workers, and opportunities for young workers, for juvenile workers. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for mentioning this, Lani, because I think that's a very practical element that business can actually be much more proactive, right? And we know that a lot of the child labor is actually children in working age that have left school at a fairly young age, or 15 or 16 or 17 years old, and that are working in hazardous working conditions. And the lack of alternatives for them is a real challenge. And so business getting engaged in that, I definitely see that as a very practical area where business can become active. Thank you so much for this you are all very to the point. This is normally one of those sessions where I'm worried about time management, but you've all been very, very clear and focused in your message. So I actually think we can now already go ahead with the Q&A. So you can use the chat function for the Q&A, and I don't know if it will be Alison or if I should directly just go into the chat and read out questions to our participants. I see the Q&A function here. I haven't had time to scan the questions before that.
A couple of them have been answered directly in the Q&A by text, but if you want to read some of them out, then go ahead.
Do I see if they've been answered? I see open. Okay, so should I start with the open question? So maybe that's a question for you, Fanta, but anyone else can also jump in. So here's the question from an attendee who asked, any practices on how joining forces at local level with civil society and other NGOs resulted in any outcome impact in eradicating child labor? Do we have any existing examples or models that could be of help? So I don't know, Fanta, if you want to say something about that on kind of the impact and potentially successful elements of including civil society.
Oui. Alors, de ce que nous avons eu.
Yes. In our work, we realized that involvement of organizations was important. For example, inspection, anti-child labor organizations, as well as mothers' organizations, as well as others. They carried out actions not only to raise awareness, but also to inspect. And this allowed us to remove boys and girls from gold mining areas and ensure that they weren't replaced with other children. Because often, when one village stopped sending their children, another one would. Sometimes traditional leaders took measures against parents if they allowed their child to go to a gold mining area. And where schools exist, with the National Federation of Teachers, we've had many children removed from mining areas and put back into the school system. Some who missed out on a year, they go to a bridge school where they can catch up. And then they take an exam with the teaching academy, and after that, depending on their ability, they're put into the appropriate class for them.
Voici quelques éléments.
That's just a quick snapshot.
For these additional elements of examples, does any other of the panelists want to add to this question? If not, maybe there is a question in Spanish. Maybe I'll because it's Spanish, David, I will read it for you with my really bad Spanish. ¿Cómo pueden garantizar?
How can you guarantee absolutely that there is no child labor in the value chain?
Hola Inés, sí, estuvo muy bajo tu volumen.
Thank you. I actually couldn't hear the question. It was a little bit too quiet for me. Could you repeat it, please?
Spanish, you know. Okay, I'll try again. ¿Cómo pueden garantizar?
How can you truly guarantee that there is no child labor in the value chain as part of your no child labor badge?
No problem. Gracias.
Thank you very much. What we're doing is putting in place a protocol. The connection is rather choppy. On April 5th, we adopted this, and now it goes to the municipal body responsible for this. That was adopted 15 days ago, and now this regulation applies. The regulation stipulates that we need to draft a protocol to carry out inspections. So we're currently drafting this protocol. As for your question, what's key is a commitment. If you're a company and you want this badge, and then you're trying to pull the wool over the authorities, then you're truly just harming your own business. It's about commitment, as I said before. So it's not just about the government. It's also society and universities and other civil society organizations that need to be involved in this. We all need to pull together to regulate this issue. We need to work together to build a better society. But as I said before, it's about awareness raising. That is paramount. So it's about building trust amongst us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And I think it's very interesting you use the word trust, because it's not necessarily the first word that comes often to our mind when we think about supply chain management or ensuring child labor. But I think, as also the example from Vietnam showed, it's so important that we work together with business, right? So it's not just about only monitoring or only controlling, but really finding solutions together and creating that trust. That's a very nice point. I see one question that I've seen in coming, I think, twice or three times around how we manage to convince, and there is different examples, for example, brick kiln owners or factory owners to collaborate with WNCB. There was a direct question to Vietnam, how the factory could be convinced to participate in such a program. And maybe Lan, you can maybe ask this question in Vietnamese to Lani, but what kind of their motivation was to participate in such a program? Like, how can we get businesses to be ready to make such an effort? That's clearly a lot of work, what they have to do. So what is their incentives?
Hi. Please let go to Lani first for her view from the employer's point of views about why they are going to why they apply here to join this program. Lani, let me translate it for her. Lani ơi, Lani có thể chia sẻ về lý do tại sao Smart Elegant lại quyết định tham gia vào chương trình Work No Child Business được không? Chia sẻ bằng tiếng Việt cũng được. Lani có nghe thấy không?
Em đang cố gắng nghe, thì bên em nó hơi ồn. Dạ, hiện tại thì trước đây thì bên em chỉ có chính sách và quy trình về phòng ngừa lao động trẻ thôi, nhưng mà nghĩ là vẫn là đủ rồi, tại vì một số khách hàng thì yêu cầu là không có lao động nhỏ tuổi tại nhà máy. Tuy nhiên là khi mà cái dự án của khách hàng bên em yêu cầu là tham gia thì tụi em đã đồng ý tham gia, và khi tham gia thì tụi em thấy có nhiều cái để mà mình phát triển tốt hơn về quy trình, về chính sách và về vấn đề mà làm việc với các nhà thầu để mà kiểm soát trẻ em tại nhà máy tốt hơn nữa.
Anh
có thể giúp em dịch lại không ạ?
Okay. Lani said that we at the beginning when we heard about this project, we thought we have done enough because we joined the Better Work projects and we have a good system in place already. We thought it was enough. But then when we was introduced about the program, we found actually our clients introduced the program to us, and we realized that there can be more we can do, and it's also benefits for the business. So the management decided that we joined the program, and even when we joined the program, we started the activity. We realized that there's still a lot of improvement we need to do in the program, and it's good for us to control our system, to have better monitoring, internal monitoring of our system, and also our suppliers. So we see the benefits there.
Thank you so much, Lam and Wally, for this. I think very interesting to see, and also a little bit in line with David has shared, right, that there is some incentive for business in a way that I think it has shown to be beneficial for the company as a whole. It's not only about child labor, but generally create some benefits for you. And Lani, you have mentioned your client, who obviously has probably provided some, in that sense, motivation as well. So I think it's really interesting to see and encouraging to see that more and more businesses are ready to do that. David, we have a little bit a similar question that is for you, and the question here is how you have motivated the families to participate in these programs. So parents of children that are in child labor, how do you motivate them to be ready to make changes or to support their children?
Gracias, Inés. Mira,
Thank you for that question, Inés. It starts with using our MIRTI tool to identify neighborhoods. As I said before, we put together a census for a specific neighborhood. That means that we know the names and addresses, the homes where these children live. This connection is quite poor. It's difficult to render the message.
Por el tema de la entonces el tiempo nos está permitiendo elaborar los apoyos.
The interpreter regrets that it's impossible to interpret this due to the variable volume levels.
A que vayan sus hijos, que no sea un costo el mandarlos a la escuela. Porque en el modelo MIRTI, repito,
one of the things that we're trying to do in the MIRTI model is trying to make it possible for parents to send their children to schools. The first thing they have to do is send their kids to schools. Now, how do we do that? We promote sending kids to school. And that starts with identifying those children who need support. This support can also be provided by the Mexican government. So the crux of our work is adopting this methodology, which allows us to truly pinpoint the children that need support. That's what we're doing. We hope that when schools open, we can reach out to families and raise awareness so that children can be sent to schools.
I think I saw that there was some issue with the translation to English, but what I understand with my very poor Spanish, really this importance of creating support for the families, for first knowing where the children are, who the children are, and then being able to support these families and show them the opportunities to, for example, work with the parents to make sure that they allow the children to go to school, but also creating the support that the families need. I think that's something we have seen very much so in our work around child labor inclusion. It always needs to, the two things, the kind of often economic pressure that the families are under, maybe some awareness, attitudes, cultural element, all of this needs to be considered together. We cannot just approach one point. And in our experience, we have seen sometimes it's hard for parents to accept help or to change something in the way it's working. But when real solutions are offered, like real solutions like that show them the children can go to school, they will get support, they will not have to starve because their children go to school. So when we manage to create those support structures around it, we've had, in our case at least, we have had a lot of success with getting parents to change their minds, to become very open, and often then really realizing what is better. But I also think what Lani has described on working with the parents around this awareness is really important to kind of from the beginning strengthen this idea also of the rights of children and how we need to ensure to protect the rights of children. So thank you so much, David, for giving this a little bit more information. I don't know if this is a question that you came across, Fanta, in your work. The question is from Gideon, and he asked, please, how should business address the issue of children engaged in an economy activity after hours only? I don't know if that's something you came up with, if children in the gold mines work there, half, go to school half day, work there half day, and how you have addressed this.
Thank you for that question. We have had some cases where children in their free time are engaged in some activities. That's because we have too many kids per class, so some are just attending either in the morning or in the afternoon. As a result, some of them are going out to do this gold panning work during the other half day. Some might be working in the field, some might be working in the domestic economy as domestic laborers. So what have we done? We've set up groups of children in the time that they're not in school to prevent them from going out and doing these types of work. What's most important is raising awareness in the community. The community can then contribute to make sure that children aren't going to work sites even during their free time, giving them other things that they can do. For example, we have various types of activities on the local level that children are doing when they're not in school. There are also organizations that are helping, such as oversight and protection organizations, making sure that children are not going out to these work sites. However, some children do slip through the sieve. That's why it's so important for these organizations to go out to these work sites to make sure that these children are not there. It calls for a joint effort. And let's not lose sight of the fact that teachers also play a key role in ensuring that kids are in school, that they're not heading out to these work sites. So it's a multi-stakeholder approach. Every person plays a key role in making sure that children are in the right places, that they're engaged in playing, recreational games, and so on, and not going out to these work sites. In fact, these first types of activities will help to boost their development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fanta, for this consideration. And I think it's really interesting because we talked about all the stakeholders a lot tonight, right? We talked about the businesses, the community, the CSOs, and obviously it's really important also, as you say, to really work with the children on those things and to integrate them. And it sounds that in your program you have quite put some attention to the children and what they need and what motivates them to replace, for example, the work that they're doing. And it seems it's in a context of general support for the parents. But we see that a lot when we do child labor remediation and work with children, that their first reaction is one of guilt when they hear that they cannot work. Because they feel, well, I'm failing my family, now I'm not contributing to the income. And so working with the children for them to understand that A, they don't have to. That's not what they have to do. And secondly, that we can find solution for them and their families to support them that do not need them to work. Then it becomes a bearable kind of alternative. I think if we wouldn't provide this alternative, it becomes very difficult for children as they've grown up to feel so responsible for their families. Thank you so much for this. I think there is a few other questions to summarize in the Q&A around this question of children that work partly, or also the one interesting question if it's actually possible in agriculture to have some non-hazardous work for young workers, whether that is actually a possibility. I assume, Fanta, for example, in the gold mines, there's basically no possibility for non-hazardous work. Work will always be hazardous. I don't know if David, if you have some thoughts around the hazardous work for young workers, so workers in children in working age, maybe first to you, David. I don't know if that's something that you have come across, or if you could hear my question also.
Thank you for that question. Our strategy, the Punto Tus Lego strategy, is based on generating value chains around crops. As part of the first phase of our work, we have been awarding this badge to some sets of products. But we need to have more inspection protocols in place. We need to draft them so we can educate business people. Now, what will we be educating them about? Of course, it's about ensuring that there is no child labor in any input, any product, any crop that feeds into the final product. So one thing we're trying to do is tell people that there are many products available on the market, but that what you really need to do is go out and look for those with this badge. Because that's the only way that you know that your products are contributing to decreasing child labor. Of course, this is a very thorny issue in Chiapas. It's a farming region. And I think this is an issue really across many countries. How can you guarantee that there is no child labor at any point in the value chain? In Chiapas, we believe that it's this badge that will allow us to do so. Educating people so that they can go out looking for products that are guaranteed to be free of child labor. So I hope that this example gives you some ideas about what we're doing.
Yes, thank you so much, David, for strengthening that point of how you want to address that. I see from the questions, there are a lot of questions, around how do we guarantee it. Obviously, the questions about the young workers in hazardous work or non-hazardous work, that is a really big one. I am really quite excited about all the discussions that we had. I know it's only a kind of 1.5 hour discussions around it, and obviously child labor is, if it was an easy topic to solve, we probably all wouldn't be here and would be doing other things as it's been quite a few years. But I do feel that in the last couple of years, in particular, there is so much initiative that brings together different players, but also not just under a kind of pretext, we all want to be against child labor, but really puts into practice some very practical ways of eliminating and fighting against child labor that takes into account the responsibilities of governments, that looks at how we can integrate the communities, as Fanta has described, that also really gives a stronger role to local businesses and their local supply chains, as we have also heard from Lam and Lani, and that businesses find some incentives and business incentives to become part of that. And I think that even goes back a little bit to Fanta's initial presentation of having both a top-down and bottom-up approach, where we really including all players, and obviously not the least the children whose rights are at stake here, and whose rights should be very much at the heart of all our consideration. That makes it sometimes complicated and not so easy and not necessarily black and white. But I think with all these different tools that we've heard of today around awareness building, creating tools, creating business incentives, creating actual support for the families and support and actual support for the families and their children, I do think we're probably coming much closer. And I really hope that despite the kind of setback that we're having through COVID-19, this session and many of the sessions that will follow will motivate us all to work on this. For all of those who have a few more minutes time, there will be a poll right when we finish the webinar. So please maybe stay on and give us a little bit of feedback in that poll. That would be very greatly appreciated. I think the Slack channel is going to continue, so let's continue the many discussions that we have there. Many of you have shared content and tools and guidances, and hope that we can extend all these efforts and together really make a difference, and hopefully look back to this year as one where we really gave the work around child labor a real push. So that is it from me. I want to thank again Alliance 8.7 WNCB for hosting this wonderful webinar, and all the organizations around it. Thanks so much for the support, and obviously thanks to the panelists for contributing. It's been a wonderful group from all the corners of this world, and thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us. I wish you all a good day, afternoon, or a good evening. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye.